Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Kerrigan.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I had no sound. I didn't know. Thank you, Lilt, that said that I had no sound. So now I have sound. All right. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. I wanted also to tell you that we're not really very active on Facebook, but we are active on Google+. So if you wanted to find us, you can find us all on Facebook. It's fine. But we are more active on Google+. Now today we're going to talk about incense, and we have the expert with us about incense magic, and this is something that I really like, because it's part of what I do also. I really love to do incense, and there's a lot of people who love to know how to do incense. So maybe we're going to Little Green Dragon, thank you. We're going to do a show on how to do this and the various techniques on how to do everything on incense or concerning to incense. So that's basically it. If you wanted to contact us, you can contact us on witchtalkshow@gmail.com, and that's basically it. I'm not going to delay anything more. I'm going to just release the introduction of our guest today, and then we're going to begin with the conversation. Here we go. A student of incense for over 30 years, Carl Neal became a professional incense maker in 1995. He has learned from a variety of incense makers from North and South America, Asia, and Europe. He lives in Oregon and has led incense crafting workshops and discussions across America. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today on Witch Talk, Carl Neal. Hello, Carl. How are you? Welcome to Witch Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. There's a couple of fans on the chat room already that said that your book taught them everything about incense, which is a very good thing. And it's a pleasure to have you here, because that incense to me, it's something that I really love, and I can't wait to begin to talk about this. Now, before we go there, let me just ask you. How did you get here? How did you get to love incense so much and become an incense maker, professional incense maker? How did you get here?
Well, I think like so many people, I kind of stumbled into it. It wasn't something that I set out to do. Now, I had been a lover of incense since I was a teenager. I was probably 12 or 13 the first time I bought any, and was just amazed. Just watching the smoke, and to think that smoke, I grew up in a house where my father smoked, and of course cigarettes have this horrible smell, and then to see the same kind of smoke coming off of the incense that I was burning, producing this amazing, intense, wonderful smell, it kind of fascinated me, I think. But it remained sort of just in the back of my mind. You know, I burned incense a lot throughout my teen years, just for the basic pleasure of it. And then through college, the same thing. Didn't really think a whole lot about it, except, you know, I like the smell. And then through the way that life deals with all of us, through a strange turn of events, I found myself with a retail shop in Oklahoma. And I sold incense there because I loved it, and you know, I wanted to share that with other people. And I wanted to find a way to provide incense to people with a lower cost. So I started looking into how to make incense. And what I found was there's not much. There's not a lot out there about how to do it. But through the course of things, I started learning about the incense that I had been burning, and how it really was of particularly low quality. And so I started looking at natural incense making as well. Talk about difficult to find information on. You know, there's a lot of wonderful advice out there on different incense recipes for loose incense, but there's not a lot about how to make sticks and cones and other forms that burn for themselves. So once I started uncovering all of this, and I started talking to people who are 1,000 times more knowledgeable than I am, I realized that this is information that a lot more people should have, because there was, at least at the time, and to a great extent even now, this misconception that incense making is something that's very difficult to do. It's very complex, but I've never encountered a situation where it was extremely difficult. And I wanted to share that with people, to show people that this really isn't that hard, and it's a great way to connect back with earth energies.
Now this was your beginnings, right? Now how I mean, when we talk about incense, we talk about an incense. Inevitably, you know, if you see it since ancient times, I mean, you can see that. You know this better than me. It's connected with religion, and it's connected with offerings, and and since the Egypts, and probably even before that, obviously, and even in sacred woods that were burned and released the sacred fragrances. Now, this is obviously connected for you also with religion. The incense. Was the incense that drove you to the religion, or was the religion that drove you to the incense?
You know, that's a great question, and the truth is neither.
Oh, good.
Until the point when I really started investigating natural incense, up until that point, there really was very little crossover. I was like a lot of people, that when I would meditate, or when I would do anything involving spirituality, I like to light a cone or a stick of incense. It improved the atmosphere and helped me to relax. But that's as much as I ever really thought about it, until I started finding out that there were some hazards involved with synthetic incense, and then I started thinking about, well, I've been using this in magic rituals. I've been burning these synthetic chemicals that might even be dangerous, and that was the first time that the impact really hit me between the incense and what my root beliefs were. And I realized at that moment that I really need to focus on natural incense making, because that's where the true energy is. And I really felt kind of stupid that I'd never put those two things together before. Once I did, it just opened up a whole new universe. And suddenly I was able to look at things and do things and find that incense was usable in 100 different ways in your practices.
Yes.
And the more that I work with it, the more that it tells me.
Yeah. Now, we had in the show, it was the last show actually, we had an alchemist with us talking about alchemy and how things work in alchemy and all of that, and an absolutely brilliant alchemist. And there's a chat room question, and the question is it alchemy? Is it making an incense alchemy?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I suppose that on some level you have to say yes. That in some regard, it is a form of alchemy. I'd honestly never really thought about it that way. But when you get into more advanced incense making, where you're having to be very careful about the portions, the blending, that you have a very specific outcome that you want to achieve, and you do have to utilize that knowledge in order to incorporate just the right ingredients into the incense. Certainly, that would be alchemy. Yeah.
And
well, that could be a whole new chapter in a new book.
Absolutely on your next book. Now the thing is, I think alchemy it's connected also with transformation, and it's always about transformation and transformation for the better, either chemical transformation or actually transformation of the soul. And I do think that the incense does transform you and transforms your spirit. At least it can alter your state of mind, certainly. And it's used also to do that, and many other things. But what I really think that it's very mysterious about these things and very seductive about making incense, it's rare recipes, right? So we all heard about the Kefi incense, which is this huge recipe of Egyptian incense that has, I don't even know, 23 ingredients or something like that you mix together. And it's very interesting. And then you have like there's this Moses mix also, which is something very interesting, and which is secret and nobody knows and blah blah. And then there is this other mix that the Vatican does also, that apparently they sell it up to everyone. But there is these very old recipes of incense that are really fascinating, because those were the scents that actually our ancestors were smelling at the time. It fascinates me. Doesn't this fascinate you? It's almost like a connection with the past.
Oh, well, I would say it's a literal connection with the past.
It's amazing.
It really is. As you investigate the ancient trade in the ancient world, both in Asia and in Europe, you find out that a great deal of that trade was generated by the incense industry. They wouldn't classify it as an industry, but it was the spices and the oils that were incorporated into incense were sold for perfumery as well. Those two things wrapped very tightly together.
Yeah.
That really drove a lot of the economies of the ancient world. The trade in frankincense and myrrh built entire empires in Africa just off of those things. Whenever I burn a large quantity of frankincense, it often just reminds me of Rome, because the Romans burned enormous quantities of frankincense. They used it in all of their rituals. It was very important to them spiritually. And so you can imagine that ancient Rome, unlike a lot of ancient cities, probably smelled pretty incredible with all of the frankincense that was being burned. So I really do think of it as a very solid connection with our ancestors.
It's absolutely amazing. It's almost having history alive. And you can actually meditate through it and kind of, try to connect in a deeper level. It's absolutely amazing. So, now we have this fantastic photograph of you. You were amazed. How did I dig that out? But I did. It's a beautiful photograph of you with ivy leaves on your head and a green cape. It's fantastic. Taken in a Beltane ritual, I think, that you were in. So, and I'm very perceptive on things, that image things. One of them it's your fantastic book, and it's the cover of the book. And I always, people don't really talk about this. Who did the cover, and who is it, and what it's the name of the person? Then we have to kind of acknowledge this person, because sometimes they really completely go out of without recognition whatsoever. This is a very beautiful cover. Were you involved in the making of this cover or not? Incense Magic.
And it was a very Fortunate thing, it's one of the reasons that I like dealing with Llewellyn as a publisher, that they do tend to keep their authors involved in the process throughout.
That's great. Yeah.
And I definitely was involved. They give you a general outline. This is what we plan to do, and then take a little feedback, and then they go and they shoot a preliminary picture. Say, what do you think of this? What changes need to be made, so I can provide feedback at that point. And in the end, we come up with. I have to agree with you. I can't take credit for the cover at all, but I do think it's beautiful.
Yes, it is absolutely beautiful. And the other thing, we're just looking at it. The other thing is that we have to mention who did it, because sometimes people don't really. The cover art is by it's images. There are images, but the cover design by Adrian Zimiga, which is who designed the cover, which is very good. So this is the person, Adrian, who actually put everything together. Now the picture art is from Shutterstock Images and Pinsy, but the whole thing, and then the other thing is the book design. I really love the font and everything on the book. I really do. And the book design is by Bob Gold, which is another person that normally would be absolutely unnamed and passed unnamed on all of this. Who cares who did the font and put everything together? We do. So, Bob, great job. And also Adrienne, absolutely great job. It was very, very good. The interior...
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
When the book leaves me, it really is. It's just 12-point font on white page after white page. It has no heart. It has no soul in how it looks. And these people are artists in their own right.
Absolutely.
That they can take those black and white words and they can craft it and turn it into this beautiful thing to look at. And
Absolutely.
so, I definitely applaud them, and they possess talents I will never have.
Absolutely. The interior illustrations were made by Wen Zhu, and you have a couple of them, and they're very, very nice and wonderfully made.
And that was a unique thing for this book. This is the third book that I've done.
Yes.
And I've never had the ability to illustrate a book the way that this one was done, because the artist contacted me and said, okay, I know the illustrations that you want. Can you send me photographs so I can make sure that the illustrations match exactly what you want? So every illustration in the book started out as a photograph that I took.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah, and the artist was able to embellish it quite a bit, so that you can see a lot of detail you'd never have been able to see in a photograph. So, a beautiful collaboration.
It's absolutely great. So, there you go. So, everybody has a mention on which talk about the book, which is great. So, the book is called Incense Magic, Create Inspiring Aromatic Experiences for Your Craft. And one of the things that I immediately, when you pass the acknowledgments and you think, okay, I'm going in the book now, it's going to appear part 1, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't. Actually, it's something about you, which is great, because you do have this editorial kind of thing about the author in the page where, how to write to the author and all of that we all know. And it's very, very short. But we do want to know who Carl is, and here it is about the author. So there's this huge... and it's very important. It's very important because we want to know who you are and where you're coming from before we read the book. And that's important because you are the author, after all, right? So we want to know where you stand and how did you came here to do this book. And it's absolutely amazing. Now, one of the things that always fascinates me, and you do have a little bit of history on the part 1 of the book, which is great because and you cover various parts of various empires or cities or or places, Europe, and then you go on talking about the Christian Europe, and then you go to Africa, and then you go to Rome and Egypt and all of that. In your opinion, what was the birthplace of incense, if there is one? If not, then what was the most important one of them? The most influential?
And it's an interesting question because really, to the best of my knowledge, every culture that I've studied on the planet incorporates incense in some way. Everyone uses it in some way. So when you talk about Europe, which Europe, it's sad. This is my heritage, obviously, and we really lost our way during the Dark Ages. The incense culture kind of died away, but before that, you really have to take it back to Rome, and Rome was the self-selected center of the incense universe. It wasn't by, virtue of Italy being the home of the most aromatics or anything like that. It was simply that the empire had such long arms that it reached into all parts of the world, and it liked to gather up the most amazing, exotic things it could find and bring them back to Rome. So I think you have to give that title to Rome, that it really was the capital of incense in Europe. And then after the split of the Roman Empire, after the transition to Christianity, incense became very much on the outs in Europe. And it has been a long time in coming back to Europeans.
Now we have a couple of questions on the chat room about the incense and where the incense. I'm seeing them all. I just want you to know that the people on the Witch Talk page, chat room page, I know that they are there. I'm going to make them when we get to that. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going to go, with the show in a very orderly way. So I'm looking at them. Keep doing the questions. It's absolutely fabulous. I really love this interaction. It's great because you are the ones who actually do the show for me also and help me doing it. So keep doing the questions and I will answer them. Okay? If I miss any question, just shout on the chat room, you missed my question, and I will go back to it, all right? Okay, so one other thing, Carl, that I find it fascinating, it's that, you're going to talk about incense and the fire and the animals and mild-altering properties and all of that. And then I come into this section about ethical concerns, which is something that you don't really understand. You wouldn't think that you would see something like this in an incense book, but you do have it. Why is it important for us to think about ethical principles when we talk about incense?
Well, I think that anybody who has a spiritual connection to the earth needs to keep ethics in mind with most of the things that they do in life. You have to be. I think a lot of it is simply a matter of awareness. You have to be aware of what you're doing and how your life interacts with Mother Earth and with our environment. And so I think that ethical considerations have to be a part of any conversation when you're talking about wild harvesting. You're talking about the use of plants and trees, Mother Earth. And in the case of some types of incense, you're talking about the use of animal products. And that certainly brings a lot of ethical concerns about. But I think the number one ethical concern that we have to keep in our minds as incense makers is the rarity of some of the materials that we use. Because the last thing I hope that anybody wants to do is for this incense that we're making to contribute to the extinction of a species on planet Earth. We never want to do that. And there are a number of traditional ingredients that are used in incense that are genuinely endangered. And so we need to balance everything. And I think the biggest thing there is simply to provide people with the information. They know their ethics. They know what's right and wrong in their hearts. They simply need to have the information so they can make an informed decision.
Now, I think that, there are a few ingredients, and we're going to talk about that are they're in danger of extinction. Sandalwood is one of them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that also. Now, you talk about in this book about the magic of scent is the title of it, and then you talk about the physiology of the scent, the psychology of the scent, and the language of the scent. I don't know. Did you read a book called The Perfume? or
I
perfume.
don't remember
It's
right
just
off the
perfume.
top of my head.
It's absolutely
However,
fabulous. You have to. I'm just saying. Because if you don't, it's absolutely amazing. Because it's when I read this about the physiology of the scent and psychology of the scent and language of the scent, there's a film also made out of it. The perfume, and it's absolutely it's like this journey of this perfume maker in Paris. It's absolutely amazing in the in the 18th century or 17th century, and it's the book itself. It's really it's difficult to write about a perfume. How would you describe? I mean, you can describe, but it's very difficult to describe a scent. And he goes on, and so it's absolutely amazing. And you really remind me this whole thing, the physiology, the psychology, and the language of the scent when you talk about this. And it's really important for us to understand this. You talk also about that the scent is one of the most important senses that we have. Why is that?
Well, it's really the most primitive of all of our senses. It is the oldest sensory organ that we have. And you would think after hundreds of years of studying anatomy that there wouldn't be a lot of mystery left about something that is obviously far back in our history. But the reality is that the sense of scent is processed in two completely different ways by the brain. And science has a pretty good handle on one way, but they don't really understand what the purpose of this kind of alternate connection is to the brain. Because the nose is unique in that it does have one connection where it's basically hardwired directly to your brain. It doesn't go through, a pre-cortex sorting or anything like that, like a normal sense would. It takes a lot for the brain to interpret vision, for hearing to be properly interpreted. So we have the same kind of complex connection between the nose and the brain. That exists. So that part we understand. The second connection, this direct connection into the brain, we really don't know what it does. And it's interesting to me because there have been, I would call them casual experiments, but experiments done with people who had no sense of smell, but yet exposing them to different types of incense. And one of the things that was found that incense that has a high quality of aloes wood content tends to help produce theta waves in people who are meditating. And what was found is that even without a sense of smell, that's true. The incense is still having an impact on you, even though you can't smell it. And so it's a fascinating mystery. I'm certainly not a doctor. I'll probably never get to find out the ultimate answer to it, but it does tell me that there's a very primitive connection, that the sense of smell is ultra important, so important that we have two totally different ways that the nose is connected to the brain. If one pathway gets damaged, we still have some connection between the nose and the brain. So it has to be very, very important. It's unique in that regard.
No, that's very interesting because when I posted this event, the show, and I always post this event on Google Plus and on Facebook also. More rarely, no, I'm kind of inclined to do it on Google Plus more than anything else. There was someone in Google Plus that said to me, "Oh, nice to know. It sounds very interesting, but I can't go, but I wouldn't go because I can't smell." And I thought, well, you might enjoy it because it doesn't matter if you can smell or not. It's very interesting to know how to make it and how it works and everything else. So sometimes people have a different perception about, oh, I can't smell, so it doesn't really, it's really not about, it's not really concerning me or something like that.
And I think that ties back to some of the kind of the misconceptions that we have about how incense is used. And it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
One of the ways that incense is used is that you smell this certain smell, and it helps you to shift your mental focus. It helps put you into a magical frame of mind. Those things are true. And in that regard, the scent is important to you. But in another way, incense is used to purify a space.
Exactly.
It's used to create a type of a magical announcement to other beings that this space is now reserved. It's a sacred space. We're making it welcome for you. So if that really has nothing to do with what smells good to us, that doesn't matter if you can smell or if you can't smell. It still is a way to open up a space. Likewise,
Absolutely.
you can use incense for purification.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't matter if you can smell it or not, because that's not what the impact is. It's an energetic impact, not a scent impact. So incense goes well beyond what we personally smell.
Now, we're talking with Carl Neal, Incense Magic, Creating Inspiring Aromatic Experience for Your Craft is the book. Now, one of the things that you really talk extensively about this, and then we go on the rare ingredients. It's the aromatics, and you describe them and kind of give them an explanation a little bit. And if they have different names, you kind of say them. Oh, well, this is acacia, but that it's also also known as gum arabic, and so you kind of like talk a little bit about them. There's one of them that I really am curious about, which is the Palo Santo, and it's a wood from Amazon rainforest. I have a couple of friends, Brazilian, friends, and obviously people from Brazil are not all from the rainforest of the Amazon. Just because they're Brazilians, it doesn't matter. But it's the same thing that say everyone in the United States will be in Washington, which is not really true. So, but it's very interesting to know that this is. It's the strong sense often draws the attention of animals, which is very interesting, isn't it? Did you experience with this? You just put it a little bit of Palo Santo in and just because the translation of Palo Santo, it's basically holy holy wood.
Yes.
That's basically
exactly.
it. It's amazing to me that it will kind of trigger animals. Any kind of animal? Or just cats?
Well, it has a particular impact on cats, to the point where I did animal rescue for a number of years, and I ended up with a lot of three-legged, one-eyed cats, the ones that were not adopted.
Yeah.
So I had a house full of those cats, and I had several of them that just the slightest whiff of Palo Santo would draw them instantly. And I had one that was so obsessed with it that she would steal my Palo Santo and hide it from me because she wanted to keep it for herself. So it is very, very potent. I don't know that it poses any kind of a hazard. I hope not, because she used to carry it around in her mouth all the time.
It's amazing.
It's incredible stuff, and it's a perfect example. There are those, and to people who have never been a part of the incense subculture, it's a little hard to believe. But there are people who are fundamentalist incense makers who essentially say, there are 15 incense ingredients and everything else should be pushed aside. They're very, very narrow, traditional in their viewpoints. And Palo Santo is a perfect counter to that. It's an example of something that didn't enter the mainstream incense making world until the end of the 20th century. It's, for us in North America, it's a brand new incense ingredient. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I would never leave it out simply because we don't have any traditional associations with its use. Instead, that's a perfect time when I use the listening to incense technique to let this material speak to me and tell me what it was for and tell me how I should use it. And so we bring in this new ingredient that, of course, to the people who are living in the rainforest are going, this isn't new. Our ancestors did about this 1,000 years ago. You guys are the ones just catching on. And that's absolutely true. But one of the great things that I've seen is that probably the height of the incense culture is in Japan. And to me, is at least the greatest incense company that exists in America, that sells in America, is Shoyedo Incense. They've been around hundreds of years as a company, and some of the rest are older than that. And even they have now come out with scents that incorporate Palo Santo. So they, too, have said, hey, there's something new, and we're going to embrace it, and they have done that. And it's a great change, and it's another example of the world working together. So Japan and Brazil have come together to create a wonderful incense to sell in America.
Now, frankincense and myrrh, and sometimes I've seen, I don't know if you're, olibanum, it's another name for frankincense. And I always, I don't know if it was a Portuguese thing or whatever, but I always in Portugal heard it called not frankincense but olibanum. And it's a particular frankincense, so it's not really just frankincense, but it's from a different region, right? Olibanum. So it's incorrect to call all of the frankincense olibanum, which is not really the case.
And that is true. And really, the two terms are most commonly used synonymously. And yes. I think you outlined it very well, that's not accurate, but it is how people commonly think. And I generally just use the term frankincense. I use the broader term because obviously frankincense itself is subcategorized dramatically. It was essentially a form of currency in the ancient world. Yes. So the quality of it, the origin of it, makes a big difference as to its value.
Now, myrrh, as we all know, it's just, there's another name, oponax, which is very interesting. But it's frankincense and myrrh are two. It's a blend that is really very famous. Because of Christianity and because of the of those three wise men, I like to call them wise men instead of I'm pretty sure that they were magicians, but that's another story. That give the present at the birth of Jesus, which is very interesting also, and they gave it frankincense and myrrh also. Why do you think that this combination came about? I mean, how did it come about? Is there any story about this, frankincense and myrrh? Because you actually, this is what they call the church incense.
And it's really a fascinating topic. There are entire books written just about this.
Yeah.
And it really is very interesting. And the first thing I would say is that nobody knows the origin, how far back this goes. My guess would be that this comes from an oral tradition that predates written history. So we don't know exactly where it originated, but we do know from traditional uses that last right up into my practices today that frankincense and myrrh have always been seen as balance and counterbalance, with frankincense representing the masculine, myrrh representing the feminine, and then the two together representing that universal balance. So yes. They are absolutely wonderful together. They're incredibly complementary scents. Now, I have to put a caveat in there in that there are tremendous differences between different kinds of frankincense and different kinds of myrrh. You can find examples of either one that may not be particularly pleasant to your nose, but in general, those two together, they complement each other so wonderfully that they make this universal whole from these two, regardless of exactly what type you use. And so it certainly extends back as far as we can look from a historical perspective. And absolutely amazing to me that people ever started using these substances at all. And that's something that I would love to see studied, is the exact origins of where these have all come from. But I don't know that.
Now, the other part of this is, and you talk about, mastic, you talk about patchouli, juniper. I mean, there's a lot of things here that you talk about. And you talk vetiver and, sage and all of that. The interesting thing then is to see how all of this works astrally, meaning, in the more unsensible or sensible perspective. So it's not real, it smells good. Well, yes, but what does it do to you or to the environment around you? Does it really transform it? Does it really help you in doing something? And we're going to talk about rituals that you have in the book about incense and everything. Why are we... So there is this untangible reality about incense that it's very, very important to talk about, because incense is made not just to smell good, obviously it is, but it's also, and that's what I think, where is the alchemy of this whole thing. It transforms not only environments, but also states of being, and astral bodies, and all of those things, and it can actually enhance some properties of what you're doing. Either you're doing magic, or the book is called Incense Magic. So, do you agree with me on this?
No, I absolutely do agree with you, and I think that from the incense maker's perspective, you don't learn those things right away. That you do learn more about the scent and the mechanical aspects of incense, and it's only when you really develop as an incense maker that you begin to analyze your work for those energetic purposes. And one of the things that's difficult about it is that, like a lot of other aspects of magic, there's a big subjective element to it.
Absolutely.
What works for one person may not necessarily work the same way for another person. So a lot of it has to do with knowing yourself in order to know how you're going to react energetically with the incense that you burn. So it's a definite case of be sure you understand yourself.
Yes,
but
yeah.
You're so right that really, when we talk magically about incense, the heart of incense is the energy that it stores. The incense is like this incredible natural battery, and when we burn it, we release all of this energy that's been held in these amazing materials gathered from around the world. That energy suddenly becomes available to us to use, and I think that's key for people to understand, is that when you start burning incense, you have started releasing energy, and so it's good to be focused, to know what you're going to do with it. But anytime it's new to you, you have to be prepared to expect the unexpected. These kinds of energies that you've never worked with before, it's going to be a learning and a growth experience for you. And personally, it's one that I love. I love encountering new materials. But the actual energy shift, the focus, I mean, some incense is as intense as a flying ointment. It can genuinely, deeply change your perceptions. And others are very mild, and it really comes down to a matter of experience of working with those energies to see what's going to work best with you, make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself with too much of the energy. And you will experience some differences on other planes besides just the physical plane.
Absolutely. Now, there's a beautiful conversation on the chat room right now talking about, which elements are part of incense, which elements of the 4 elements, is it fire and air, or is it, earth also, and, where is spirit? And there's this whole conversation going on. What do you think?
Well, I think I'm going to completely muddy the waters for everybody in the chat room. Because what I believe is that incense is the embodiment of all the elements. And let me explain why each is included. I think that the fire and the air aspects are very obvious. Obviously, you have to burn incense to release its scent, so it requires that fire be there. And likewise, smoke travels through the air, and you can't have combustion without air. So those two are pretty obvious. But the earth energies that are contained within incense, you have to consider that everything that you're putting into this incense started out as something growing in Mother Earth. Be it a sandalwood tree or a sage bush, whatever it is, it reaches its roots down into the earth, and that's where its nourishment comes from. It lives in the earth, in some cases, for many decades before we ever take advantage of it. There are other incense ingredients, specifically things like amber, that have been buried under the earth literally for tens of thousands, even millions of years, absorbing those earth energies. So I think that certainly earth energies are a really important part of what's in incense. And then comes the counterintuitive one, which is water. You would think water, incense, no connection. You have to keep water away from incense, in fact. But that's where the knowledge of how incense is made is important, because you cannot make incense, at least you can make loose incense, but if you want to make any kind of combustible incense, you have to have water, because water is what we use to activate the binders that hold everything together. So incense starts out dry, we add water to it, put it in the shape that we want it to be in, and then we dry that water back out. So I think all of those energies are present within incense. I think that it can symbolically represent all of the elements, and it does physically represent them as well.
It's absolutely fascinating. Now, another thing, that now that we talked about water, and, you know, as we know, water has this kind of ability of retaining emotions, and, you know, it's connected with emotions and all of that. How important it is the state of mind of the maker of the incense on the making of the incense. And I'm talking about states of mind, emotions, and everything. Do you get into a particular state of mind before you do an incense or not?
Well, I teach a lot of incense-making workshops. I've been doing that for about 10 years.
Yes.
And one thing that I have always consistently taught is the importance of your frame of mind when you're making incense, because every time you touch incense, you are interacting with it on an energetic level. And when you make incense, you're telling the incense not only, this is the shape I need you to be in, but you're also telling it, this is what I want you to do. This is the ultimate goal of the energy that you're going to release, so you can align that energy within it. So I recommend to people, turn off your phones, put on some pleasant music, sit down when you know you're going to have 15 or 20 minutes of quiet, so that you can really relax and reflect on what you're doing, because that state of mind will have a tremendous impact on what that energy does when the incense is burned and released. If you're having a bad day, if things are just not working well for you, that's not the right moment to make incense, because you're going to align that energy with those negative energies that you're feeling in those moments. And that can be a very unpleasant surprise later when you go to use that incense, and you find out that it's actually worse than no incense at all, because you put this negative scent on it.
Absolutely. Now, it's very interesting because you just talked about, you know, energies and all of that, and it's really interesting, because I always wondered, you know, and you can put intent on the incense, right? You can put intent, not just I'm being blank to do the incense. But you kind of, you know, you can align yourself with the energies. If it is like a solar incense, for instance, or if it is like a cleaning incense, you can just kind of align and will it to the incense so that you will enhance that energy with your own while you're doing it. You know,
that is completely true.
Yeah.
That energetic aspect is one of the reasons why I encourage people to make their own incense. Because you do not know what has gone on with the incense that you buy off the store shelves. Don't misunderstand, people. I'm not making a blanket condemnation of commercial incense. There's a lot of fantastic, amazing commercial incense out there. But when you make incense yourself, whether it's loose or moist or cones or sticks, it doesn't matter what form, you know everything that's happened with it. You know all the energies that have been put into it. So it's kind of a safety measure. You don't have to worry about any unexpected surprises from energies that may have been put in by someone else.
Absolutely. And we don't know. So it's better to do it yourself, guys. So do it yourself. You know, buy the book and do it yourself. So then you talk about endangered and rare ingredients, which is very interesting. And one of them, it's aloes wood. Then you talk about also sandalwood, which was the one that I mentioned previously, citrus and ambergris and saffron. Saffron was always very rare, I think, right? It was just
yes, because of the way that it's gathered, yes.
Oh my God! I saw. You know, I don't know where you are, but we are in Massachusetts. We have this fantastic shop. It's called Atlantic Spices. And it's on Cape Cod, in Massachusetts, and they do have saffron, but it's this tiny little box, and it costs $20 or something like that.
Yes.
And it's just this little tiny stems with little pieces of pollen in it. It's absolutely amazing. It's just very rare. Very rare indeed. And when people say, oh, it's saffron, it's made with saffron, and sometimes it's used in solar incenses, because it's really, and when I see a solar incense that it's made of saffron, that they say that it was made of saffron, it's very, very yellow, I kind of doubt a little bit, because it's so expensive, to make it that yellow out of saffron.
The saffron incense that I make only has the tiniest bit of saffron in it. It is mostly sandalwood.
Yes.
And just the tiniest bit of saffron. But at least saffron, the nice thing about that is, it is rare, and boy, is it expensive if it's the real thing. But it's not rare because it's endangered. It's just rare because it's very difficult to collect.
Yes. Yeah, it's just
so that's a good thing. I don't have any concerns whatsoever about using saffron except paying for it.
Yes, exactly. What is the most rare ingredient that you think that it is now?
I think that if you really want to take it down to the very most rare, I think you have to go with ambergris. Simply because of the way that ambergris is produced, it is an oddity of nature. It's a rarity. There's no way we can duplicate it. There's nothing we can do to farm it or to hasten its development. It happens as it happens. And, there are people who devote their lives to gathering it because it's very rare, very expensive. And those who are in the industry can make a great deal of money off of it. And, of course, that brings up the big concern. When an ingredient is that expensive, there are other people out there who will try and pass something else off and get that money and sell you something that's worth a lot less. So it comes back to what I always say: find suppliers that you have a lot of customer ethics, and then stick with those suppliers.
Now, where is the ambergris come from?
Ambergris is a very unique product. It comes from the intestines of a whale. Whales who eat krill. Krill are microscopic organisms that live in the ocean, but they have little tiny bones, and these little bones over the years build up in the intestines of the whales, who will then eventually regurgitate this material to clear themselves out. I imagine it feels really good to get all those bones out of there. But the material then has to spend several years in salt water, in brine, to refine to the point where anybody uses it. So ambergris is either found floating out on the ocean or it's gathered from beaches. Those are the only two ways that you can get it. And honestly, I had some concerns when I first started learning about it. I thought, oh my God, are people out there killing whales to cut them open to get the ambergris? And the reality is you can't do that because it's not usable ambergris until it's been in the ocean for years. So I don't have big ethical concerns about ambergris as long as you're buying from a reputable dealer. But it is kind of a disgusting sounding, but very important aromatic in fumes as well.
Yeah. Now, the name of the shop. There was someone asking me the name of the shop on Cape Cod. It's called Atlantic Spices, and they do mail orders. So you can go Atlantic Spices, MA, Massachusetts, and the internet, and you can actually order their oils and it's wonderful. They do have a lot of things like resins and and other things, and herbs and it's wonderful because it's in bulk. It's such huge quantities. So if you're thinking that you're doing a little bit of incense for Beltane, you're really kind of not going to go very, you will end up with a lot of incense for the rest of the year because it's like a huge bag of things, and it's very good. It's really, really good, fresh herbs and everything. Also, for culinary purposes, also they do have wonderful mixes and teas and, you name it. It's absolutely fantastic. So that's that. Now, how do we select the incense? What is the best way to kind of like know if this incense is good or not? I mean, a lot of us probably, do not have the ability of doing it or do not want to do it, but we can spot the great incense, the good incense. There was this kind of shop in New York City, I don't know if you know this, called Magical Child, and they did absolutely amazing incense. And I do have, and Magical Child is out of business for I don't even know how many years. It's kind of 15 years or something more than that, maybe. And I still have the incense, and it smells wonderful. And it's amazing.
Wow, that's great.
I'm telling you, it's absolutely amazing. And they actually edited a book about the recipes of the Magical Child incense shop. It was just an amazing shop in New York City. There's no shop like this in the world. There was no shop like this in the world, and unfortunately, it had to go away because the owner died. But you would go in and you would ask, I want an oil for this, and they would mix it right then and there for you. And then they will tell you, you have to wait, blah, 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 for 24 hours before you use it, don't use it more than this, and blah, blah. So they will give, it was almost like a pharmacy. You would have like contraindications and side effects, and literally. And, don't put this if you are in the street, just put this in blah, blah, or don't use this when you're, just use this in this occasion or that occasion. And they did the same with incenses. So they would do the incense for you. So if you want an incense, if you go to Magical Child, you actually have to wait a little bit, unless they had the incense already mixed, and it was a mixing. But they did by demand. So if you wanted to do an incense, I want an incense that will work for this and this, they would do it for you right then and there, and it was absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, it's not yet. It's no longer there. But when can we? And they were absolutely fantastic. What can we look for when we buy an incense? And I'm kind of like talking more about loose incense, and also the other forms of incense, the sticks and the cones and all of that. But how do you know that it's a good incense?
Well, and that's one of the things that's really important for me to show to is that we spend a lot of money on incense. I think it's kind of a hidden part of the economy, that a big part of the pagan economy.
Yes.
And it's really good to know that you're getting what you're paying for. And so the first division that I make when it comes to incense is it natural or is it synthetic? That, to me, is the most fundamental question about any type of incense. Does it have synthetic ingredients in it? Because I certainly won't use anything in my magical practices that's synthetic.
Yes.
That's not to say I don't use them around the house. I certainly do. But when it comes to my magic, it's all natural. So that's the first dividing line. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that, you want to make sure that, the ingredients, if you're talking about a loose incense, you want to make sure that the ingredients have been packaged well, that they're stored well. If they're in one tiny thin plastic bag and they look like they're all clumped together, you might stay away from that because maybe it has not been handled or stored well. So you want to look at that. You want to look, if they're plant materials, are they the right color? Do they look faded? Those are all considerations for loose incense, but I really think that in general with loose incense, it's much easier to make an evaluation because you can look at it, you can see the different pieces of ingredients, and you can, because of it being in a natural form, it's a lot easier for you to pick out and identify individual pieces. So from that point of view, I think loose incense is kind of superior. When you look at cones and sticks, you can't tell anything by looking at them. All you can tell is what color they are, and that's as far as you can go. So you have to use your senses as a consumer a little bit when it comes to sticks and cones. One of the things that I look for, it's rare, but it does exist, is there an ingredients list printed with this? And there are several companies that do that. They do print at least the primary ingredients that are included in an incense, really important for anybody who may have plant allergies. If you're allergic to lavender, you want to make sure you never buy incense that has lavender. I like that a lot when I see that. And for a long time, we used to say, Shoaib is the only company that does that, but they're not anymore. There are a number of companies that are putting their ingredients list. So that's another place you can look. Look at that list of ingredients. Are these the materials that you want to see used for whatever your purpose is? But when you kind of go beyond any of that, just use general consumer tips as well. What's the condition of the package? If it's a box, has it been beaten up? Because that obviously could indicate that the material inside is broken. Are there any water stains, anything like that? One of the things that I suggest that people do is not pay a tremendous amount of attention to how a natural incense smells in its package. You don't, whether it's loose or cones or sticks, no matter what kind it is, you don't want to immediately put it up to your nose and smell it to try and determine what it's going to smell like. Because with natural incense, it has to be burning for you to smell what it's actually going to smell like. A lot of the ingredients, especially like resins and woods, basically don't release any scent until they're heated. So what you smell in the package is not going to be what you'll smell when you actually use it. So if you're really questioning, especially if you're looking at buying some very expensive incense, there's incense out there that costs more than platinum ounce for ounce. And no, I don't own any of that, but I've heard about it. But if you're really looking at investing in some natural incense, I would ask the shopkeeper to burn a little for you so that you can actually see what it's going to smell like when you use it. So it really is a matter of being a knowledgeable consumer. There are a million brands of incense out on the market, but of those, 90-95% are synthetic incense. So from a magical perspective, I don't recommend those for magic. So that really does narrow your choices down to just the natural producers.
Now, what do you think, and this is a concern for me, what do you think about glitter in incense?
Glitter in incense. Well, there are a lot of things that people have asked me about over the years that they would like to add to their incense.
Yes.
And I've particularly had requests for white incense. And glitter is a new one on me. I don't think anybody's ever asked for that before.
Really?
But what I always say is, as long as it's not something that's going to be toxic when it burns, clearly you want to stay away from that. But there's no harm in experimenting with it and seeing what the impact is going to be. I'm not very rigid on my rules when it comes to incense. I'm an experimenter, and I like to try new things, and I like to push the envelope. That's really kind of this new book. Almost a third of it is exactly that. It's like, here are these experiments that I've done over the years, and look what happened. So I say, let's bake some incense with glitter in it and find out what happens.
Well, I'm asking you this because there was a shop in Massachusetts, in Salem, who actually uses glitter in the incense. And my concern about glitter is that I know that they are silica, which is basically a glitter that you can actually, it's natural. It's basically seashells. But but sometimes they use glitter that it's plastic. It's plastic glitter, basically, like little stars and things like that. That it's plastic. Or little squares of shiny things that are plastic. So I'm really concerned sometimes when that is mixed in the incense itself, that will release a toxic fume when when it's burned. So it's really we don't know where it comes from and how glitter is. I personally don't really mind glitter, but it's just something that I don't really, it sparkles. All of the girls in the chat room.
If I were to make incense with glitter in it, I think I would use metal flake. That would be my approach. But if it's plastic glitter, then I say stay away from it. I would not burn plastic. There are a lot of ingredients that are put into incense that never should be. Plastic would certainly be right up there. A lot of synthetic incense
for obvious
contains
reasons.
Dipropylene glycol. which is never intended to be burned. It releases poisonous gas when burned. That's not what it's for, but yet someone somewhere thought it would be a good idea to put it in incense. So it kind of comes back to the same thing that, don't burn plastic. Not good. Not
good. Not good, people. No, not good at all. Now, the other thing is, you talked about the price and everything else. Mica, I don't know if it is mica or mica, M-I-C-A, which is a stone. It's kind of like a little stone that you can actually use. It's a natural rock that you can use. You can use also seashell. There's seashell particles that are very interesting. So, sensors and holders, that's another thing. And this, I assume that it depends on the way that you wanted to use the incense for. If it is in a ritual place, within a ritual, and depends on what ritual are you doing. If you're doing, ceremonial magic kind of ritual, it's one type of incense burner. If it is another one, more casual one can be, But you talk about various types of incense burners. You talk about the materials of the incense burners, and you go on wood and ceramic and all of that, the size of it, which is something, and the styles that you can actually use. Now, what is the best one? It's like asking, okay, from all of you children, what is the best one? and then you talk. What do you think? What do you think?
Well, I think that you set it up correctly. That really you ask yourself two questions when you're selecting a censer. What kind of incense am I going to burn, and what situation am I going to use it? And those are the two primary determinants, because if you're using incense in a group setting, especially if you're going to be picking up the censer and moving it around, you've got to take that into consideration when you select a censer. I'm sure that we've all seen the warnings on the top of coffee cups, caution, contents are hot. I don't think from a common sense perspective we really need those kind of warnings, but just to be safe, folks, when you burn incense in a censer, it gets hot and it can burn you. So you want, if you're going to move your censer around, you want to make sure it has a long handle on it, or it's on chains, something like that. So that's an important consideration. Obviously, a censer that is going to burn sticks may not be the perfect censer to burn cones, so the form that you're using is important. But enough beating around the bush. The best incense censer, as far as I'm concerned, is the dish-style censer that's been filled with ash. That's the most versatile. You can burn absolutely any kind of incense there is on the ash inside the bowl censer. The Japanese in the Kodo ceremony use a type of censer called a koro, which is just the right size to fit in your hands and allow you to cover the top of it so that you can release just as much scent as you want to. And that's probably, at this point in time, the ultimate evolution of the incense censer. It's small enough that you can carry it around, but it's big enough that it can hold a lot of ash and insulate well if you're using charcoal incense. And there are some absolutely beautiful Japanese koros. I'm lucky that I own one. They're very, very expensive. And what I discovered many years ago is that you can buy a ceramic coffee mug for $1 that does the exact same thing. And it's got a handle on it so you can move it when it's lit. So I would say coffee mug filled with ash is the most versatile kind of censer you can have.
Very interesting. Now, you talked a little bit about the filling, the insulation material. Now, you talked about ash, but I know that you can put other things in it to insulate it. What can you put in it?
Well, you can use lots of different things. Certainly, I think the most common one that people use would be sand. And one of the great things about sand is it's available in just about any color you can imagine. So for people who are very focused on color in their magic, sand might be a great choice. And I think it's the most common, but another very common one would be using salt. as a fill material. And really, from a physical perspective, the salt and sand, they act very much the same. The problem with both of those materials, if you're burning incense actually on the surface of those materials, is that they have a tendency, once the incense burns down towards the bottom, to put the incense out because there's no airflow underneath it. So that's something that, if you notice, if that's a problem that you're having, your cones are burning down, but they're not burning all the way, they're leaving, a ring at the bottom or something like that, you might want to consider changing your fill material. Now, some people use, I guess you could say, the giant version of sand, which is they use gravel. They use aquarium gravel, which is also available in a wide variety of colors. And that works extremely well for holding sticks or for particularly large-based cones, because there are actually little air pockets that are created because the gravel is so big that it leaves spaces in between, and that traps air underneath the incense that you're burning. So that's a good choice. But to me, it always comes back to ash. But ash is just, it's not only the best, most flexible material, but it's also renewing. The more incense you burn, the more ash you have.
Yes, absolutely.
You can buy ash. You can buy very nice white ash from most of the Japanese incense companies, and that's what I use as a starter for fill. And then after that, it's simply a matter of not knocking the thing over, and it will continue to grow and grow and grow over the years. I have one censer that I put the ash in there at least 10 years ago. And I pull it out occasionally, and I'll bake it to bake any scent out of it. But that pile has just grown and grown. I think I've probably started 2 other censers off of the ash that was in that. And I have a lot of people ask me, do you have to buy this Japanese white ash? There's no stores in my neighborhood that sell that. And the answer is no. You can make your own ash pretty easy. If you have a fireplace, if you build a campfire, especially if you have a ritual fire, if you have a bale fire.
It's great.
Gather those ashes when you're done, sift them so that they're fine particles, and there you go. Fill your sensors with that. It's already charged from the work you've already done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. It's absolutely great. Now, you talked about some of us have a little bit of difficulty in with the charcoal, and how do we do the preparation of the charcoal, and what about the charcoal dishes? The little circles of charcoal. Some of they're auto combusted, so that you kind of just light a match and under them, and then you just they light themselves. But some of them don't. If they don't, and they don't really kind of give this beautiful glare-ly amber glow, when they are lighted or lidded. And what can you do to light them up? Because sometimes they have a little bit of humidity. They really not, they don't really start for some reason. What do you do?
Well, and charcoal is one of those things that I know I've been guilty of. I think most of us have, that you don't really give it any thought at all. You grab a roll off the shelf, pay $2, go home and use it.
Exactly.
And I have learned a lot about that charcoal that we have used so much. I was in the incense retail business for 10 years, and I sold tons of it myself. But I am very, very selective about the charcoal that I use. If you use charcoal that is self-lighting, and there are a number of major brands, I won't mention them, but they're very easy to identify when you do light them. They're generally very thick charcoal tablets with an impression in the top, and when you light them, they sparkle and little sparks run all over the surface of it. And what that comes from is the addition of potassium nitrate into the charcoal. If you use that kind of charcoal and you try and light one and it won't light, about the only thing you can do is put it in a pair of metal tongs and hold it steadily over a flame. That will get it to burn eventually if it's capable of burning. Unfortunately, if it's that self-lighting type, that's really the only thing you can do. Now, if you are buying natural incense, which I guess you could say saltpeter isn't unnatural, but if you're buying scentless charcoal, which would primarily be from one of the Japanese producers, I think Shoei is probably the number one producer in America anyway, that those charcoals, they're made of bamboo charcoal, and if they won't light, then you have the ability to put those in an oven and bake the moisture back out of them. So you can salvage them if they're the natural type. If they're bamboo, then those can be baked back to what they originally were. And
oh wow!
You can't do that, or you can, but it's a risk to do that with the self-lighting type because you may actually set them off inside the oven.
Yeah,
and that's probably not what you want to do.
No.
So you can hold over a flame for a prolonged time, and if there's moisture trapped in there, you will bake it back out. So it will eventually light. But apart from that, and I really recommend that you go with the low scent charcoal anyway. Brick for brick, it's the same price. You just generally have to buy a lot more. There are some shops that actually break up the natural charcoal into small packages so that they're more price competitive. But one good box of high-quality bamboo charcoal will last you a very long time, and it won't produce that terrible sulfur smell that we get off of the self-lighting charcoal.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about incense sweeping and air mixing, especially air mixing, which is very interesting. What is incense sweeping?
Well, incense sweeping, which I don't know that I've ever really fallen in love with that label, but it seems very descriptive, so I went with it. But it's something that most of us are very familiar with. I think probably the most familiar form, as many of us have seen, the abalone shell with the burning sage bundle and the use of a feather to spread the smoke around. That's the classic example of sweeping with incense. That's exactly what you're doing, is that you're sweeping the smoke to where you want it to go, oftentimes on a person to help that person purify right before a ritual. And you're able to, the sweeping technique that I talk about in the book is a way to cover a person's head to toe, to cleanse them completely in a very short amount of time. But I think that's something that a lot of people are familiar with. Air mixing, not so much. That's a technique I discovered completely by accident. As a new incense maker, when I first started rolling natural incense, I was a little over-enthusiastic and had a tendency to burn a lot of incense at the same time. And one of the things that I noticed was that if you burn two different scents at opposite ends of a room, initially they were two distinct different scents. You could easily pick one out from the other. But as you went back and forth between them and you started stirring up the air in the room, the two scents began to mix. And after a while, you're left with just one scent that's the combination of the two. And so I kind of extrapolated this idea because I loved, when I first started as an incense maker, I would burn a different kind of incense at every quarter. And so I would end up with at least 4 different kinds of incense burning. And if you use very complex scents, it gets kind of overwhelming within your circle. So what I did was I simplified the technique where I used a single herb incense at each quarter. I'd use maybe sage at 1 quarter, use patchouli at 1 quarter. And when you get all 4 of these scents burned and then you begin to walk and circle your altar, you are going to draw that smoke in behind you. It's going to follow you like a trail, kind of an incense shadow. And so the more you walk through your circle, the more these different elements blend. And so you can see right there that there's a tremendous symbology to that, taking the 4 separate elements and combining them into one single energy. But there's also the physical scent aspect of that, because you can take 4 very different, unique scents and blend them into one very complementary scent. I don't know, in my fanciful moments, I think of it as kind of representing what we could do with, world peace and bringing different cultures together that, e pluribus unum, from the many, one.
This is, I could be here forever talking with you, just saying. because we can be here, talking about how the techniques, and how do you put 4 different, kinds of incense in every quarter, and I'm just saying. My rituals, sometimes you can see the people behind you because I burn so much incense, which is a concern because then you have people with asthma and all of that. And it's really a struggle because I really love, and I do have a work that I do with incense only, and it's a magical work that we do in our group, and it's just amazing. And we burn tons of incense. It's so bad that I have to take the smoke detector obviously out of the room because it would just go crazy. So I just hide it in before the ritual, hide it in a shell or a shelf or put things on pillows on top of it because it's just horrible. It's just so much incense that it's just crazy. But I love it, and I just love it.
That you would.
I can't see the people. I can't see it.
It's my favorite self-incriminating story. So some people may have heard it before, but in these days when I was an early incense maker and I was really experimenting a lot with it ritually, it was a Samhain ritual. I was practicing by myself, and I was in my shop where I'd started making incense. I actually lived above the shop. So I was downstairs, and I was doing this intensely elaborate Samhain ritual that involved way too much incense and far too many candles. It wasn't very safety-minded at all, and it was the same thing with thick haze of smoke. It made the candles look really cool, though.
Yeah.
But I had forgotten to do what you were smart enough to do, and so halfway through this ritual, the smoke detector goes off. So I always try and remind people to deactivate or remove your smoke detectors before you start. But of course, here I am in the middle of this most important ritual of the year. Smoke detectors going off in my shop. This is in the front of my store, which is glassed in. It's on Route 66, so it's got tons of traffic all the time. And I didn't even hesitate. I opened the circle. I leaped out. I jumped up on top of the counter in my store to pull the battery out of the smoke detector. And it was at that moment that I remembered that this is a skyclad ritual, and I'm standing in a glassed-in store. So there were all these cars parking in. People started honking and waving.
Oh, my. It was a party.
Forgotten.
It was a party.
It absolutely was. I know that I brought smiles to plenty of people's faces, and it taught me a lesson I have never forgotten. I've never had a smoke detector go off on me during rituals since that day.
And the horrible thing is that you never find that damn battery. It's so difficult to take out, and it goes on, and you're trying to take the damn battery out, and you can't. It's just horrendous. All right. So this book is so wonderful that has so many things to talk about that I can't tell you. I mean, I have to jump so many things, and we can't talk about everything. But one of the things that I wanted for you to talk about, it's in the section about the chapter 8 about magical applications of non-combustible incense, and it's adding incense during rituals. How can we do this, and what is the best way of doing it?
Well, a lot of that depends on what your stylistic approach is to magic. I think that the most important thing, especially for people who work within magical circles, which not everyone does, but for those who do, when you cast that circle, you need to make sure that you've got everything. You don't want to have to open it and go back out and, oh, crap, I forgot the sage. So that's one of the things that I recommend to people is to make sure that all the ingredients that you could potentially need are right there. For me personally, I actually store those things under my altar to make sure, at least in quantity, that they're sitting there. But what I like to do, I like my magic to be very visually appealing. Anything that I'm doing in a formal ritual setting, I want it to be appealing to all of my senses, including my eyes. And so what I like to do in that case is I will use very special containers for each of the different either blends that I'm going to use or individual ingredients. Especially when you're talking about loose incense, it's a wonderful thing to mix your incense in circle right then, immediately before you use it.
Yes.
And if you're going to do that, I want that visual aspect, the appealing aspect. So I will put the different ingredients each in a kind of a unique container. I'm a big fan of both wood and stone containers, and I have a pretty big collection of them. But I like that presentability. So even if it's just one kind, I'll have it in a specific kind of container. I might have 10 on my altar, depending on what I'm doing. But I like it to all be contained. It's also really important that you know what everything is. So that's another reason that I don't like to have 20 containers that are the same size and shape. I'd rather each one be unique so I can instantly tell, that's the dragon's blood, and so I have gathered up a collection over the years, and I'll tell you, dollar stores are the place to shop for things like that. They have all kinds of very unusual containers that you might not ever see anywhere else. And so I'd say half, at least, of my containers have come from there. I have dedicated containers that will be marked somewhere on them that, this is strictly for this single item. And then I have some more generic containers for things that I'm going to use maybe once every 5 years in a ritual that, I can't really justify a special container for. But I really like that aspect. I like making sure that everything's at hand, ready to go, because I need my mind to be focused on the work at hand, not wondering about where did I leave the frankincense.
Yes, yeah. No, you don't want to be thinking about that when you're doing a ritual. Now, in your book, you do have rituals, suggestions of rituals for loose incense, and you have some text incense for divination, some solstice incense. And circle. It's just very interesting. I mean, this book is not really, we have to be clear here so that people not be misled. This is not really a recipe book, although they, Carl has recipes in here. But it's more about how to do it and discussing the techniques and the do's and do nots and how things really work. And this is the type of book that you don't find everywhere. I mean, there's tons of books on recipes, and they're very fine. That's wonderful. But they give you the ingredients. They don't give you, how to do it. And this book, it teaches you how to do it, how to mix them. And not only that, but it also taught you the techniques of burning them and use them, which is very interesting. Now, the other thing is that, you can tell, you can tie the shoes of a man 40 times. But, that man will not know how to tie the shoes until you taught them. So it's really what it is. You really have to, you can have recipe books, and that's very nice, but until you have the technique down and how to use the and how to blend them, you can't really do it. So this is the book. It's called Incense Magic: Create Inspiring Aromatic Experience for Your Craft, from Carl Neal. It's absolutely amazing. Now, we really do not have time. I would stay here 4 hours, but we don't have time. A goddess invocation baths. I mean, you have so many beautiful things here. And then you go on Asian style incense burning. But I really do want to, and you touch that, you touch the place and plate, and listening to incense, a group activity. You have so many things, studying rituals and games. I mean, this book is absolutely amazing, and I can't really go on to every single detail because I want to talk about your workshops, I want to talk about your websites and all of it. But am I missing something very important, Carl? Just say it to me. I really like this thing about the combinations, when you do like combinations of sticks and cones, and you kind of blend them together, and you put them like on top of each other, so when you light one, the other ones will light in, And the other thing is also, I like the rune incense. When you light the rune incense, and then you design a rune with the incense, and then you light it, and that incense will burn on the path of that rune, and will actually draw the rune as it will burn, which is absolutely amazing. These are some of the highlights that I'm remembering from your book. Am I missing something? I'm missing a lot.
Well, no,
I
think you hit on one of the parts that at least is the most fun for me, and that's the incense trail.
Yes, it's
I
great.
love trails. It's an incredibly ancient technique. It's not like I invented this.
Yes.
People have been doing this for tens of thousands of years, but I think it's kind of new to us in the pagan community, and it's incredibly flexible, and it has all kinds of magical things you can do with it. And basically, all you need is a censer, some ash, and some incense powder. Even just sandalwood or even cedar powder is all you need to do this. It's a simple technique. It's infinite. It's like writing. It's not complex to understand, but you can do almost anything with it. So that's something that I'd encourage people to read about. To me, it's just fun. It has lots of magical implications. It has all of these historic significance. But to me, it's just fun.
It's really wonderful, and I really do want to show people your website, which is absolutely wonderful. You have a lot of things in here. It might not work, but we'll see. All right, so we'll see if it works or not. All right, it works. So it's called incencebooks.com, INCENSE books.com, and it's Carl Neal's books. And then you have, all of the, we're looking at it, Carl. It has all of your books. Now, this Incense Magic is your last book, but you do have other books that you did. One of them is Incense Crafting and Use of Magical Scents, which is another book that you did. What is this about? Is this the same thing? What is the difference between Incense Magic and this Incense Crafting and Use of the Magical Scents?
Well, I think they work extremely well together. The new book, Incense Magic, is really techniques for using incense, for incorporating incense into your meditative or magical practices. So it really is kind of an owner's manual for incense users. Whereas incense crafting and use is for people who want to learn to make incense. And it specifically is about making self-combusting incense, cones, sticks, cylinders, coils, those kinds of things that you light and they burn on their own, as opposed to incense that requires an outside heat source. But it actually does go in and talk about moist incense. At the top of the show, you talked about keepy, which is probably the most famous of all moist incense, even though historians still can't agree on what all the ingredients are supposed to be. I talk about that in this book as well and provide recipes. This would be the book that has recipes in it. It's a troubleshooting guide for people who make incense. If your incense isn't burning or isn't burning the way you want it to, the troubleshooting guide will step you through and try and figure out what's wrong with it. So they really are very complementary. The new one is on incense use. The first one is on incense making. Put them together, you have pretty much a complete picture of incense as far as it goes in the magical world.
Absolutely wonderful. So, is this a Llewellyn also a book?
Yes, both of those are
All right.
Llewellyn.
Yes, yeah. So you can find it on Llewellyn. We have to thank Llewellyn very, very much for their generosity on sending us this fantastic book of Carl, Incense Magic. It's absolutely amazing. Now, let me show you the rest of your site. You have here another book, which is called The Magic Toolbox. What is this about? It's called The Ultimate Compendium of Choosing and Using Ritual Implements and Magical Tools.
Yeah, the Magic Toolbox is really it's a reference work to a wide variety of tools that are used in magic and ritual. It's not exhaustive. I think you'd need 4 or 5 volumes to be genuinely exhaustive. But I think it touches upon all of the tools that we most commonly would encounter or that we would want to use. And goes through in kind of an encyclopedic way and looks at every aspect of that particular tool. Not only, what's its symbolic meaning, how is it incorporated into magic, how is it used in a ritual, but also how to locate one, what to look for when you purchase one, how to make a tool from scratch, how to properly cleanse a tool that you bought that was used by someone else. So it really is, it's not so much a book that's designed to be read in a linear fashion cover to cover. It's more like, I wonder about cauldrons, and you flip to the section on cauldrons and, find out how you can make your own and how you can take one that somebody else made and customize it for your own needs and, how you're going to use it in your rituals. So it really is kind of a general reference book on altar tools.
That's great. I just love it. I love it. All right, so then we have workshops. Now, you do a lot of workshops. You have one that it's called Incense Making 101, which is good. Oh, here we go. I just, sometimes it goes away. So you have Incense Making 101, then you have Magic Incense Making 101, and Advanced Incense Making. So you have all of these workshops. You're available if people want you on organizations, festivals, or you just say parties also. This is very interesting. You can go to a party. Let's just call Carl and send him into this party to do the incense work. It's wonderful. I just love it. Now, do you do a lot of these, or where do you go? Where can we find you?
I have, about 3 years ago, I moved from the Central Plains to the Pacific Northwest. When I was back in the center of the country, I did workshops all over the surrounding area, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. Traveled throughout, got to go to a lot of absolutely wonderful events and festivals and meet tons of great people. And I got to teach several thousand people how to make incense at these various workshops. Just last year, I've been in Oregon for 3 years, but just last fall I started doing workshops here, and the response has been fantastic. Even though I'm relatively unknown in this community, everybody has embraced me, and I have been doing workshops. I'm sort of taking a few months off here during the summer, but we're setting up workshops for the fall now. I am doing one on July 25th in Salem, Oregon, as a fundraiser for our local Pagan Pride Day.
Oh my God, my heart just stopped because you said Salem and then Oregon.
But I've
Salem,
been,
and I was like, oh my.
I've been so fortunate that I've gotten to travel around the country. People have invited me all over, coast to coast, to do incense workshops. I did one I guess it was technically winter. San Jose has a large festival called Pantheacon, and the response there was just absolutely phenomenal. Everybody was great, and we had it was a party. Just a fun atmosphere, a lot of laughing, a lot of fooling around, and a lot of making great incense.
Yes, yeah. And you had you talked with you probably met Christopher Panzak, a lot of other people. I mean, it's wonderful, right?
Yeah, actually, if you look, I think it's on my About Me page.
That you have this Pantheacon. Yeah,
that I was able to do that panel with Oberon Bell Ravenheart and Christopher Panzak. Oh my! It was very, very thrilling.
It's wonderful.
I don't know that I deserve to sit up there with great people like that, but it was certainly a wonderful, exciting time.
Well, Carl, you are as great as them. What are you talking about?
I will never put myself up at that level, but I just appreciate that people come to events and they come with a great open mind and a great spirit, and they want to learn things and they want to share what they already know, and love going to festivals. I just to meet pagans all across the country. And just as a hint for anybody who may be listening out there, I've never gotten to do anything on the East Coast. Philadelphia is as far east as I've ever gone. So if anybody else on the Eastern Seaboard who'd like some incense workshops, you get in contact with me because I'd love to come out and do communities.
Absolutely. Now you have Yule incense making. This is other incense making workshops. Samhain incense making. Hand fasting incense making, which is very interesting. Spring incense making. Asian incense making. Incense of the Pacific Northwest. Making incense with wood binders. Dragon's blood. You don't know this, but dragon's blood is my favorite ingredient.
It is mine as well.
What? Oh, really?
Yeah.
It is mine. Dragon's blood incense. Incense made with herbal teas, which is absolutely fascinating. I just love this workshop. I wanted to go to all of them. And then you have incense use workshops, how to use the incense. And then you have basic incense use, basic magic incense use, advanced incense use, listening to incense. What do you talk about when you do a listening to incense? What can we expect?
I think it's really one of the most important and overlooked aspects of herbalism in general, or certainly with herbal incense. And it's a wonderful technique that has come over from Asia, specifically the Japanese Kodo ceremony talks a great deal about listening to incense, which just seems oxymoronic. Obviously, you smell incense, you don't hear incense. But you do hear incense if you quiet your mind and you listen to it. All kinds of aromatics will talk to you, and they will tell you exactly how they should be used. They will tell you exactly what kind of benefits or constraints that they offer, but you have to stop and listen to them. And so that's what we do in that workshop, is that we spend a lot of time just sharing and enjoying a variety of aromatics and taking the time to still our minds and listen to what those aromatics have to say to us. When you do that, a lot of times what you'll find is that correspondence chart in the book that you've been using for the last 10 years does not agree with what this particular ingredient is telling you. That doesn't mean that the book is wrong. It just means that that aromatic is giving you an inside track as to how you personally can use it to the best benefit. We just have to stop and listen.
It's just amazing. I just love the concept, and I love, and it's so true. You don't really do that. You don't really stop and listen to just light it. Carl, thank you so much for being on Witch Talk. It was wonderful to talk to you and to be able to listen to you, and thank you for sharing your wisdom about making incenses. This wonderful, absolutely fantastic. I have to tell you this. I think that the incense maker and making it's actually an art, and it's actually an art as it is painting, or as it is sculpting, or as it is anything else. I have a friend of mine who actually does incense. He refused to write down any recipe, and he does it as ephemerous as it is, as he can get. So he does it, he doesn't write it down, he mixes everything at that point in time, then he burns it, and it's gone. Nobody knows how it was made, what ingredients was in there, what are the quantities, nothing. It's just, he just senses, he picks up the ingredients, he mixes the oils and the gums and everything else, and the resins and everything, and then he just mixes them and burns it. So it can't get more ephemerous than that. It's just
vanished. Well, no, and I have to say that he must be someone who really has mastered the ingredients that he works with. He has listened to those materials. He knows exactly what he needs to do with them at any given moment.
Yes. So it's absolutely amazing because people just say, "Are you crazy?" This is a fantastic incense. Now we can't know how is made. Why do you know what is in? Do you remember? No, I don't remember. He says, "I don't care." It's just enjoy it. Why are you having? You know what I mean? So it's almost like an ephemerous thing. He doesn't want to be. It has to. He says that it's an art. That it has to happen and go away.
Well, you have to enjoy it. It's one of the ways that I describe incense is that it's combustible art, and that's exactly what it is.
Yes.
When you're an incense maker, we make incense dough. That's how we start off to make cones and sticks. And I had the rare privilege of getting to do a workshop with a bunch of physical artists who really they felt, and they would take this incense clay and make the most incredible, amazing things out of it that I never could have done. Then we let it dry, and we burn it, and it's gone. And I think that to cap this entire conversation off, I think you just hit the nail right on the head. That incense is something that's to be shared and enjoyed. You know, one person can burn incense by themselves and enjoy it, but that same piece of incense can bring pleasure to 10 or 15 people. It doesn't cost any more. So it's a shared experience. It's shared energy. It brings us closer together. And if you work alone, it brings you certainly closer to Mother Nature and to the spirits of the earth.
Absolutely, absolutely. He also said, and this is one of the things that he also said that you should make incense blind. So you should not really, you should make it with your nose, not with your eyes. So that's what he said, which is very interesting also.
Well, and again, that's something that clearly he's developed a high level of skill. I think anyone can work to that goal if they so desire, where they can get to that skill level where they can combine like that. And that is incredibly rewarding. I love making for other people on the spot like that. You read their energy, and you listen to your ingredients, and they'll tell you exactly what needs to be done.
It's absolutely great. Ladies and gentlemen, this was Carl Neal, the author of many books, but one of them that we actually talked about in very in depth was Incense Magic, creating inspiring aromatic experiences for your craft, and I'm certain that you will inspire people on doing aromatic experiences more and more and more. Thank you so much for being here, Carl. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to just close the show, and then don't hang up, so that I will talk to you in a bit. But I'm going to just close the show. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Carl.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So this is it, everyone. This is the last part of the show. We're closing the Witch Talk for today. Next week we'll have more guests in here with wonderful things to say to you and to me. Just enjoy your week and have a wonderful, wonderful, magical week. Bye.